Since the Twitter files have begun being released, there have been numerous revelations about how government agencies like the FBI and CIA use their platform for political purposes, including censoring information and collecting personal data from users. The FBI even paid Twitter for information. This corruption between Twitter executives, many of whom are former FBI agents and intelligence agencies, has been widely documented in the numerous releases. Award-winning journalist and author Matt Taibbi, who was selected to help curate the release of the Twitter files and who has taken a lot of heat for it, is here with us now. Matt, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Kim.
First of all, I think inquiring minds want to know how much more first is there to the Twitter files? Like how many more threads can we expect? Because what number are we on right now? Are we just 10% in or halfway in? Or are we almost to the end?
Well, I can tell you that I think we've only looked at an infinitesimal portion of the data. So even though we have an overwhelming amount and could probably, I was joking with one of the reporters, like I could spend the rest of my life writing about the stuff we just have now. But we've only seen a handful of accounts, and there's a lot more to search and a lot more to look through. It's a little bit of an open question about how much longer the project's going to go on, but I've had no indication that it's going to stop anytime soon. So we're still going.
So how did you even get involved first? Just did Elon call you up and said, "Hey, Matt, come take a look at my files," or how did this whole thing come about?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much I can reveal about that because I think
Okay.
I made the two conditions that I agreed to on this one were that everything would come out on Twitter and that the attribution would just be sources at Twitter. So at some point, I'm going to be able to talk about the backstory, which is actually quite amusing and funny in some ways. But what I can tell you is that all of us were brought in and basically told we could look at anything we wanted to, including the current company, that nothing was off limits, and that if we found wrongdoing now, in addition to wrongdoing in the past, we were free to write about that. But most of us have been focused on the documents.
Yeah, you've actually taken a lot of heat for this, and even for that, the two conditions. I saw that when you mentioned at one point that there were these conditions, people came at you and was like, "Oh, so you did it for these? You're kowtowing to the richest man on earth, or you're doing PR for the richest man on earth." I mean, what do you say to that? Like to all these the accusations that you're just running PR for a wealthy billionaire?
I mean, any working journalist knows that's complete nonsense. There are negotiations that go on in literally every single reported piece that involves a source. There are conditions that are attached. People, when you get information from anybody, you're always basically haggling with the source to try to get the best possible terms for your readers. In this case, I had to make one pretty dramatic concession, which was that it couldn't come out on my site first. It had to come out on Twitter first. And I felt I had to say something because I have subscribers who pay for my content, and I thought they would be offended if they saw a story of this magnitude come out somewhere else. And so I felt I had a responsibility to say something. I probably should have worded it better, but that was the deal. But really, any journalist knows that you're always making making arrangements with your sources. And also this whole thing about doing PR for the richest man on earth, it's absurd. People are saying, well, what about his motives? It's irrelevant what his motives are. I know what my motives are. My motives are that I'm interested in the history of Twitter and what its relationship is to the government and all those things. And we never care as journalists where stuff comes from. It's an element of a story, but as long as it's true, it doesn't matter.
So I definitely want to get into, the biggest findings that there's been so many releases and there's been a lot of information there, and I think a lot of it, for many of us, it has been, I know a lot of establishment media, especially, are just like, oh, not even covering it, or they don't care, they don't think it's a bombshell. I think a lot of it has been verifying what many of us have suspected, but. One big question. So I know that there was a delay in one of the releases. Was it the second release where there was a big delay? And it was because you guys discovered that Jim Baker, who was one of the top FBI guys, was working at Twitter, and actually he got access. So am I getting this right? He had access to the files first. So he was able to sort through them before you guys were? Is that what
Yeah.
happened?
Yep.
Okay. So how much do you think he blocked before you got your hands on it?
I don't know. My instinct is that, so when I first saw the documents, and this all came together very quickly, like in the space of 48 hours or so. And so when I first got the documents, I, my immediate instinct was that these had already been vetted, probably in pursuant to litigation, and that instinct was confirmed when I saw in the documentary record that there were emails saying, please preserve all your documents because of these following cases, right? So it looked and felt to me like many data sets that I dealt with before, that had been curated for a lawsuit. And so I wasn't terribly worried. The go-between that I had to get the documents was somebody who did not have a history with Twitter. It was an attorney that was totally unrelated to the company. And so I didn't have any reason to suspect that anything had been left out. And there was lots of stuff in there that was damaging. So it seemed legitimate to me. However, when Barry Weiss came on board, she was the one who made the discovery because she was in the office that weekend and just happened to overhear somebody talking about having to check with Jim about something. So it was around that time. It was after the first release that we started to have problems, both obtaining new material, and then we were also looking at the stuff that we were getting, and it looked like spam and the kinds of things that lawyers give you when they're trying to overwhelm you in a discovery process, with boring stuff. And it was at that point that we found out that it was Jim Baker, and things moved quickly from there, and he was quote unquote exited from the company.
Yeah. So there's no other blocks that you know of, being able to see everything that you need to see.
Well, Michael Schellenberger found a document that's pretty telling, and it's an email from the FBI agent Elvis Chan saying to look in the teleporter portal, which is the way the FBI communicated with all these companies, and saying, look, there's 10 documents in there, have a look. And this was right before the New York Post story came out. Now, the problem with teleporter is that when you open these documents, it's sort of like Mission Impossible. They're timed to disappear. So even though we can see that they existed, we don't have any way of accessing them, or at least we haven't figured that out yet. So we're looking, you never know. I mean, the data sets are so enormous with this kind of project that it's like archaeology. You find a little bit of something that looks like a foot, and then there's like a little bit of a shoulder, and eventually you're trying to figure out what kind of animal you're dealing with, and that's how it works.
So there's 10 documents in there that you can't see.
That's right.
This is like the JFK files, right? Where it's like that last 3%, they just will not release to us. So it's like, what is on those 10 documents? And that might be, very damning or telling of a lot of other things. What do you think out of all the files that you have, you've been going through this, you've been covering it for a while, there's been a lot of releases. What would you say is the most damning thing? There's been so much, but what would you say is the most damning or the most shocking revelation?
I think the two major revelations, the things that are most incontrovertible about the Twitter file so far, for me, the first one is the relationship between not just Twitter, but all the tech companies with the DHS and the FBI, and then by way of those agencies, a whole range of other agencies, from HHS to Treasury to Department of State to the CIA to NSA, and they're all sending moderation requests. And we can say pretty much without a doubt at this point that they had a highly sophisticated, high traffic system of accepting moderation requests from government agencies. And I think that's a significant revelation. The other one I think that is important is Barry Weiss's report about what Twitter calls visibility filtering and what the ordinary person would call shadow banning. So this was sometimes dismissed as a myth, maybe as recently as a year ago, but now we have definitive proof that they did that. And they can control, what we found is that they can control the visibility of any user down to an extraordinarily idiosyncratic degree. Like they can make you all the way down to not searchable, and then amplify you to be the most popular thing on the platform. And so it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's just another conspiracy theory that's been proven to not be a theory at all, but an actual reality.
Right.
And it's like, how many more of these do we need to see before people stop saying it? Just stop calling everybody a conspiracy theorist if you don't agree with them, because in the end, you're going to end up looking like an idiot. That's kind of what's gone on over the last few years. What's interesting is that it looks like Twitter somewhat pushed back on some of these requests. There was a document that you put on your Twitter thread from Adam Schiff's office, from the Select Intelligence Committee, and throughout the document, when they were making these requests, Twitter seemed to say, no, we don't do this. No, we don't do this. Like they were saying, remove any and all content about Mr. Misko and other committee staff from its service to include quotes, retweets, and reactions to that content. And they were like, no, we don't do this. And then, label and reduce visibility of any content about redacted that Twitter does not remove for any reason cited above. No, we don't do this. So did you see a lot of pushback? Like how much pushback, if you were to give a percentage from what you've seen so far, would you say they pushed back 10% of the time, 50% of the time, or even 90% of the time?
No, it's definitely not 90. I would say 10% might be an accurate figure.
Really?
We have to do a quantitative analysis of all this, because part of this is the way this worked. Like, for instance, the FBI would deliver a report from some other agency in the government, maybe the State Department, maybe the CIA, the NSA, whatever. And it's extraordinary. Like they would send basically one paragraph and say, we assess that these accounts are being used for social media engineering. And then they would send an Excel spreadsheet with, 1,200, 1,300 names on it. And so in order for us to really get a handle on what happened, we both have to see the other end of that decision tree. And we have to go back and look through all those accounts and see which ones have been suspended and not, and count it up. I mean, it's a big job. But anecdotally, I would say you see pushback in a few cases, and in a very few cases, you see what I would call ideological or philosophical pushback. Like there's one person on January 6th who says, aren't we, something to the effect of, aren't we worried about creating a dystopian gatekeeping system, right?
Yeah.
And that person is quickly shut down. But that's very infrequent. You see that maybe once every 1,000 cases.
Okay, so we're seeing all of this abuse of government. I mean, to me, it's pretty obvious that there's been a First Amendment violation here, that the government was pressuring Twitter to censor and silence Americans. I think that there would be a case for individual Americans against maybe, I know that there have been cases against Twitter as a company, and also people have been filing lawsuits who've been named in these files and who've known that they've been shadow banned or diminished in some way, their voice is diminished in some way. They've also gone after the government. But what other consequences? I mean, what are we going to do about all of this? So we see this, we see the abuse of power, we see the overreach. What is going to be done? What can be done, do you think?
That's a difficult question, because certainly we're not going to get Elon Musk to buy all the companies, right? I think that's highly unlikely. And one of the more shocking revelations to me with all this is how many of these companies were involved in this sort of proactive content moderation. And it includes companies you wouldn't even imagine would have some kind of relationship with the US intelligence community. I don't know how sophisticated the relationship is, but you see the DHS, the FBI talking about companies like Pinterest and Wikimedia, and so unless all of these companies sort of rise as one and decide to throw off the government yoke, I just don't see something significant happening. I think it's going to have to be some kind of congressional solution where there are hearings, we find out exactly the extent of the problem in all these other places, and then somebody's going to have to get a majority of votes to say they can't do this. And I am maybe a little bit skeptical that that's ever going to
Yeah.
happen.
I'm skeptical that's going to happen also because so many Americans seem to be okay with all of this. I mean, that's the most shocking thing about it is they just seem to be like, well, we need to silence those people because they're crazy conspiracy theorists and their ideas are dangerous. They're dangerous for democracy. I mean, they've really been able to gaslight people into believing that free speech is a bad thing. So I'm worried that nothing's going to happen either. I'm
Yeah,
worried we're
I mean,
doomed.
certainly that's been my experience. In fact, that's part of the reason going into this project that I was so anxious to find out what was really going on, because for years I'd been trying to convince colleagues um, that this was an important issue and that we had, the press needed to get on it quickly. If you go back and look, I started to do features about this in like late 2018, and was completely unsuccessful in getting other people in the media to pay attention to this issue. So it's only really people who are kind of outside the tent of traditional corporate press who
Right.
are registering any objection to this at all, which, you know, I, a lot of people have said, "Oh, you saw Poppy Harlow from CNN saying no respectable media, major media voices are covering this story." Um, well, that's on them, I mean, like I think ordinary Americans do think this is a serious issue, and the press is going to continue to lose audience and trust if they don't realize that this is a serious problem.
Yeah, I don't even know what's happened to. I don't even. Can we even call them the press? I mean, they're not journalists. I just freedom of the. I just it's so far gone at this point. They're spreading misinformation largely on purpose. And you even mentioned that some of the pushback, when they were saying that you were spreading, doing PR work for the world's richest man, and you even pushed back and said, looking forward to going through all the tweets complaining about PR for the richest man on earth and seeing how many of them have run stories for anonymous sources at the FBI, CIA, the Pentagon, White House, etc. And my guess is some of them ran stories that weren't even anonymous sources that we saw even with Fauci and with the Great Barrington Declaration, for example, that they actually wrote an email. There was an email between the top guys there at the NIH saying, "Hey, we need to reach out to our sources and squelch this story." So my guess is phone calls were even made and like, "Hey, can you write something up about this?" I mean, I just don't even know what the future of the press is anymore. And if we lose that, I do think that the way we thought America was, the America you and I have envisioned it to be, is no longer that America. It's a very different animal at that point.
Absolutely. If you go back, reporters have had an important role in preventing this kind of thing in the past. And you think about, the family jewel story that Cy Hirsch did in 1975, where it was the CIA's domestic surveillance program that came out. It was very controversial at the time because there were a lot of people in the media who said, you can't hurt the government too much with this kind of reporting. It's just too damaging. But they did the right thing. They did the right thing in publishing the Pentagon Papers. They did the right thing in covering Watergate. The press has to be seen as separate from the
Yeah.
government. And when you have this kind of an effort, like this really, really broad, intense effort to penetrate the machinery of communication in this country, and the press doesn't push back. In fact, they're the most enthusiastic cheerleaders of it. It's like a reversal of role, right?
Yeah.
Like they're doing the opposite of what you would expect in that circumstance, and that's a major problem. I think if the press had acted the way we would expect, this could never have taken place. But the election of Donald Trump probably was a major factor in
Yeah.
convincing some of these reporters that this had to be done.
They're no longer reporters or journalists. They're just propagandists at this point, and that is super scary. So, Matt, are you working on another set of files? I know you just released some Tuesday, but you got more working that more that you're going to be releasing soon.
Yeah, I'm working on some stuff, and there's data sets I haven't even looked through yet. So I have to go through all of that and do another layer of reporting. I think this is the stage of the story, though, for a bunch of us, where we have to like take a step back and try to start thinking about what some of the bigger picture themes are and do a little bit more reporting. In the beginning, not to be too wordy about this, I think there was a little bit of a strategy to try to get material out there so quickly that it was faster than the responses that could be cooked up,
Yeah.
and I think that worked to a degree, but now we have to find stories that have a little bit more harder hitting impact each time.
Did we ever get the Fauci files yet? Have those been? I haven't seen anything
I'm
really for the.
That's not mine, so I
Okay.
don't have insight
Whose
into who's
is
on that
that?
one.
So I can
Yeah,
ping him and say, when is this coming? Who's on that one?
that's not me. Obviously,
Okay.
there's a crew of people, and that's been pretty hush hush. The operational security on that's been pretty good. So I don't know who that is. It's not, there's how many of us? There's four of us for sure, right? Who've openly done threads, and I don't know who's on that one.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm still waiting on it. That's what I'm really waiting for is those Fauci files.
Yeah.
Matt, okay, one last question before we let you go is where can people see all of these files in one place? I mean, that's the thing is like hunting through Twitter and finding all the threads. And I know you guys do tend to pin the latest thread to your profiles, but that's just the latest thread. Then we have to dig through your profiles in order to find the pins, the threads prior to that. So is there a spot where all of these are located?
There is. I actually just released a couple of days ago on my site on taibbi.substack.com uh, a single page that has capsule summaries of all the different threads, links to everything, links to the accounts of the other reporters involved, um, and a glossary of terms. That's been a complaint that there's so many acronyms involved with this
Yeah.
story. It's a weedsy, difficult story if you're not paying attention from the very beginning. And so we're trying to make it a little bit more user friendly, but you can find it all there. And I'm going
Okay,
to update
good.
it as time goes.
Yeah, good because it's definitely been difficult to try to follow. And some don't even have names. They're not labeled like number one, number two, number three. They're just kind of there. And you've done like sort of like what are they called? I'm losing the word, but like
Supplemental.
yeah, supplemental Twitter files, right? To go along with the bigger Twitter files. So it'd be good if they were all just in one spot, so we could just be like, okay, one by one, let's go through these files.
If I could just quickly on that, this is new terrain, I think, for me, for all of us. Like, it's a new format of doing
Right.
this kind of thing, and so we're inventing it on the fly, and there are strengths and weaknesses of it.
And you're also
I'm
limited by
obviously
characters on Twitter. You can only say so much.
right.
Right.
Right, and then for me, sort of notoriously too verbose writer, it's been difficult because one wants to explain everything in detail, and that's not possible with Twitter. But I do
Yeah.
think that the virality of Twitter and the sort of uncontrollable nature of it helped spread the story in a way that was important in the beginning, especially.
All right, Matt. Well, thanks for being here. And everybody should check out your Substack. And we just put that link up there. And the link will be down below. So that way you can get all the Twitter files in one spot. But otherwise, you can go to Matt's Twitter account and check out some of the latest threads that'll be posted there. But I'm waiting on those. I'm going to be keeping my eyes on whoever's releasing those Fauci files. I'm going to
Me too.
hit up everybody and ask, like, is it you? Are you the one releasing them? I got to check on that. So, all right, Matt. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks so much, Kim. Take care.
Hey guys, the Biden administration is turning a blind eye to inflation, which I'm sure is at odds with your goals of securing your savings. I know it is for me, and I worry about the dollar and the value. So when you finally had enough of the games that the government is playing with your savings and retirement, diversify into gold with Birch Gold. I'm tired of my money being impacted by stupid decisions by leaders in Washington. For over 5,000 years, gold has withstood inflation, geopolitical turmoil, and stock market crashes. And here's the great news. You can still get it. You can get physical gold, or you can also get physical gold and silver in a tax-sheltered retirement account. Birch Gold makes it easy to convert an IRA or 401k into an IRA in precious metals. Here's what you need to do. Visit birchgold.com/Kim to claim your free info kit on gold. They have 20 years of experience converting IRAs and 401ks into precious metals IRAs, so that's separate from IRAs. It's something different. It's physical gold and silver in that IRA account for you. Birch Gold can help you do it. So just protect yourself with gold today by visiting birchgold.com/Kim. Again, it's easy to convert your IRA or 401k into an IRA in precious metals. Visit birchgold.com/Kim to get your free info kit.